AITA for refusing to help raise my brother's baby because he got my wife pregnant? I'm a 28-year-old, and I have been working as a software engineer for 5 years. I started at a small tech startup and climbed the ladder to become a senior developer. We develop enterprise solutions, payment systems, CRM platforms, that sort of thing. It is not the most glamorous job in the world, but it allowed me to buy a decent 2-bedroom house in a good suburban neighborhood 2 years ago. I bought it before the marriage. My company might not have the fame of Google or Apple, but it is solid. I have a base salary of $90,000 with annual bonuses that usually hover around $15,000 to $20,000. I have health insurance that actually covers things and a 401k with matching. It is the kind of stability most guys my age still dream of. My boss, Vince, 42 years old, took me under his wing when I started. He is an old-school developer who moved into management but continues to code. He did not just teach me best practices in programming. He showed me how to navigate corporate politics and how to negotiate my salary. He helped me get $12,000 more during my last promotion and taught me how to manage client expectations without promising the impossible. Then my wife, now my ex, Chelsea, 26 years old, came into my life at a friend's party 3 years ago. She was a stunning blonde working as a registered nurse at the local hospital, specializing in pediatrics. There was immediate chemistry that everyone noticed, that kind of connection that makes you feel like you have known someone for years. What first caught my attention was the way she lit up when talking about her job. Not the trivial stuff, but the technical aspects of pediatric care. She could explain complex medical procedures in a way that was understandable even for a tech guy like me. Smart, dedicated, and invested in her career. Exactly what I was looking for. We dated for a year before I proposed. She cried, said yes, and we organized a small wedding in her parents' church. About 50 people, friends, relatives, and family. I spent 2 months of salary on the ring, a 2.1-carat diamond on a platinum band. For context, my younger brother Griffin, 24 years old, has always been the golden child. 4 years younger than me, but always the center of attention. More handsome, more social, better at charming our mother and getting whatever he wanted. He played varsity baseball in high school. Me, I was the chess club guy building websites in his spare time, the classic cliché. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who worked hard but never really measured up in my mother's eyes. My father was always fair with both of us, but Griffin was clearly Mom's favorite. That dynamic never changed. The contrast between us was almost comical at family gatherings. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, Griffin arrived 2 hours late, without the dish he had promised to bring, but accompanied by a girl he met the day before. Instead of being annoyed, Mom started fussing over them while I had been there since morning helping prepare the turkey. Dad just shook his head and quietly poured me another glass of water. Dad is a retired mechanical engineer. Logical, methodical, he respects the rules. He is the one who taught me how to change the oil in my first car, how to fix a leaky faucet, that sort of practical stuff. He never really understood my work in code, but he respected the fact that I found a stable career. Mom is a former schoolteacher who took early retirement when Dad's engineering firm took off. She always had a soft spot for Griffin, whom she called her artistic and sensitive soul. After college, I went straight into software development while Griffin drifted from one job to another. He would work a few months, get bored, then quit. He always had a story about toxic management. Meanwhile, his credit card bills mysteriously became my parents' problem. Twice, I bailed him out of minor legal trouble. Once for driving with an expired license and another for trespassing at an ex-girlfriend's apartment complex. It cost me nearly $3,000, which he promised to pay back as soon as things got better. Finally, I helped him get a position at my company in the sales department. Vince, my boss, was reluctant. He had met Griffin at the company Christmas party the year before and had not been impressed. But I vouched for him. I said I would keep an eye on him. Griffin had the necessary charm, and I told myself that having this job would bring him stability. And besides, families should support each other, right? The sales position offered a base salary of $65,000 plus commissions. Not bad for someone with Griffin's patchy resume. I spent 3 weekends training him on our products and industry jargon. I told him this was his chance to build something concrete. He seemed grateful, said the right things. Vince gave me one of those looks like I hope you know what you are doing when I introduced them. Chelsea and I settled rather well into married life. It was not a Hollywood movie, but it was solid. We talked about starting a family maybe in a year or two. I spent my weekends working on the house, installing a kitchen island, building a deck in the backyard, that sort of thing. Chelsea handled the decorating, giving the house a look straight out of interior design magazines. I invested about $20,000 in improvements the first year. New hardwood in the living room, renovation of the master bathroom with a rain shower and heated floor, landscaping the garden. Every penny increased the property value while giving us a place we both loved. The first year went well. We had our Sunday morning pancake routines, Wednesday date nights, a few weekend getaways to her parents' place by the lake. We hosted game nights with friends, took a cooking class together. All those things couples are supposed to do. We looked happy. About a year in, I was handed a major project at work, redesigning the payment system for a large hospital chain. The irony is not lost on me today. I was working much more, often coming home after Chelsea had fallen asleep. Weekend work became normal. The project was supposed to last 3 months, but it stretched to 6. I started missing Sunday pancakes, Wednesday night dates. But this project was a stepping stone for my career. Successfully implementing a new payment system for a company valued at $2 billion would put me on the fast track to a senior architect position. Higher salary, stock options, more control over the projects I chose. I explained everything to Chelsea, and she seemed to understand. She even brought me dinner at the office during the first few weeks of overtime. It was around this time that Chelsea made a new friend at work, Paige, a travel nurse from Seattle on a 6-month assignment at our hospital. Paige was everything Chelsea was not. Single, carefree, a bit wild. Overnight, Chelsea started going out for girls' nights with Paige and coming home with stories of clubs I did not even know existed in our town. I was too absorbed in my project to really notice how much things were changing. Everything started getting weird about 4 months before it all exploded, right around the time my big project was wrapping up. The system finally launched, and I was eager to get back to a normal life with Chelsea. But somewhere along the way, the definition of normal had changed. Chelsea's schedule became unpredictable. She had always been regular with her hospital hours, 3 12-hour shifts, then 4 days off. But suddenly, she was picking up extra shifts and going out more often with colleagues. When I asked her, she said the hospital was understaffed or that her friend Jocelyn was going through a breakup and needed support. One night, I checked our bank statements and noticed Chelsea was withdrawing between $200 and $300 in cash every week for 2 months. When I asked her about it casually, she replied vaguely that she preferred paying in cash for small purchases and girls' nights. On the surface, it held up, but it was new behavior. I tried to reconnect. I proposed a romantic weekend to celebrate the end of my project. She told me she could not take time off. I offered to cook her favorite meal. She texted me at the last minute to say Paige needed her help with something. A rational person might have connected the dots sooner, but I was still operating on trust. 6 years of building enterprise systems had taught me to look for multiple data points before declaring there was a bug. I needed more proof. Then there was the phone stuff. She was constantly texting with this little smile on her face. But as soon as I walked into the room, she would flip her phone over. When I asked who she was talking to, she would reply just Jocelyn or the work group. After I helped Griffin get the sales position at my company, he started coming to office happy hours more often. Chelsea came too, saying she wanted to support both of us. There was this one night at the local bar where I got stuck chatting with a client who showed up unexpectedly. I was on the other side of the room for at least 45 minutes. When I finally managed to break free, I found Chelsea and Griffin deep in intense conversation in a booth at the back, heads almost touching. They jumped a little when I approached. Griffin immediately launched into a story about a potential contact at the hospital where Chelsea worked. On the surface, discussing a lead with the purchasing department made sense. What did not make sense was the way Griffin's hand stayed on Chelsea's arm a second too long, or the way Chelsea's cheeks were flushed like I recognized from our early days. But again, my own brother, my own wife. I filed it as an anomaly, not a pattern. Griffin also started dropping by our house unannounced. He brought Chelsea little gifts, her favorite coffee from that specialty shop downtown, fancy chocolates or candles she liked. When I thanked him for his thoughtfulness, he said stuff like I'm just looking out for my sister-in-law. At the time, I thought it was sweet, completely blind. At work, Griffin was doing really well as a salesman. He hit 115% of his targets 3 months in a row. He dressed better, seemed more focused. I was secretly proud that the help I had given him was paying off. Colleagues congratulated me for setting him straight, and I felt this misplaced sense of brotherly accomplishment. Then about 2 months later, Chelsea started getting sick in the morning. I would hear her in the bathroom at 6 a.m., the shower running to cover the sounds. One morning, I got up to check on her. I held her hair while she was sick. I suggested she might be pregnant, and she panicked, really panicked. She said it was just a virus going around the hospital. She immediately made a doctor's appointment, but did not want me to come with her. She said there was nothing to worry about. I tracked her cycle on my calendar. We were supposed to be trying for a baby. After all, she was 2 weeks late, which never happened before. I did not insist. I figured she would tell me when she was ready. Maybe she wanted to be sure before announcing the news. My friend Austin, who works in hospital administration, not Chelsea's hospital, met me for a drink around that time. He asked how things were going, and I mentioned Chelsea's mysterious stomach trouble. Morning sickness, man, he said with a wink. I told him Chelsea might be pregnant, and he got this strange look. You guys are still trying for a baby? When I said yes, he simply nodded and changed the subject. Later that evening, he texted me. Hey man, I don't want to cause trouble, but how is Griffin doing at your company? I replied he was doing fine and hitting his sales goals. Austin never explained why he asked. Around that time, Mom started acting weird too. She was calling Chelsea directly instead of calling our landline like usual. When I was present during her calls, Chelsea would say things like, yes, I got the recipe, or I'll check that sale, but the conversation seemed longer than necessary. Once, I walked in while they were on speakerphone, and Mom quickly said, oh, Derek is home. We'll talk later. Mom had always liked Chelsea, but suddenly they had this new closeness. They went shopping together, had inside jokes I was not part of. Mom even gave Chelsea a family heirloom necklace that was supposed to go to my future wife since I was a child. When I said I was surprised, Mom replied, well, she is your wife now, isn't she? No, there was something off in her tone. It all fell apart on a Thursday in April. I was working from home while Chelsea was doing a shift at the hospital. I had planned to surprise her with her favorite takeout for dinner, hoping to reconnect after weeks of sensing a distance between us. Around lunchtime, I received an email informing me that a furniture delivery I was expecting was scheduled for the next day. I needed to confirm the time slot, but I could not find the initial confirmation email in my inbox to reply. We shared a desktop computer in our home office. Chelsea used it for her continuing nursing education, and I used it for personal projects. I was logged into my email account, but I remembered Chelsea sometimes tidied up my emails when she used the computer. She loved having an empty inbox, whereas I left unread messages. I thought maybe she had seen that message and moved it to a folder. So, I logged into her email to check if she had forwarded it to me. That is where I saw an email exchange between her and my mother with the subject line, "Don't let Derek find out." My stomach knotted. I sat there staring at that subject line for what felt like an eternity. A voice in my head told me to close the browser, respect her privacy, but a louder one screamed, what the hell? I started reading the conversation, hands shaking, and it was like taking punch after punch to the face. Emails exchanged over 3 months between my mother and Chelsea explaining how to hide Chelsea's affair with Griffin. The first messages were vague. Mom asked Chelsea if she was sure about following this path and warned her to be more careful with Derek. But very quickly, they became explicit. My mother was actually giving her advice to cover up the relationship. When to claim having shifts at the hospital, which excuses to use. Going so far as to offer her own house as a meeting place when Dad was golfing. Stan always plays 18 holes on Thursdays. So you have at least 4 hours, one email said. Mom had created a detailed schedule indicating when Dad would be away from the house, so Chelsea and Griffin could meet there. My own mother plotting behind my back. Then the bomb dropped. The latest emails talked about the pregnancy. Chelsea was 2 months pregnant, confirmed by her doctor, and they did not know if the child was mine or Griffin's. The timing matched both. There was an email where Chelsea was panicking after I suggested her morning sickness could be pregnancy. My own mother told my wife to pass the child off as mine in any case, stating that Derek would be a better father anyway, and that what he doesn't know can't hurt him. The whole conversation looked like a conspiracy novel. There were minute-by-minute alibis, backup plans, even a shared calendar where she tracked my work schedule and organized their dates accordingly. What struck me most was the methodical nature of it all. It was not an impulsive mistake. It was a calculated and ongoing deception involving the three people supposed to love me most. It made me sick. I sat in front of the computer for what must have been hours reading those emails. Each one was more devastating than the last. I kept hoping to find something, anything, that would prove this was all a misunderstanding, a bad joke, anything other than reality. But no, it was painfully clear. I took screenshots of everything and saved them to a USB drive. Then I printed the most compromising ones and put them in a folder. I called Vince. I could not think straight and needed someone level-headed. "You need a lawyer," he said immediately, "and don't confront them yet." Vince knew a very good lawyer. His second divorce had been complicated. He made the call from my living room and put it on speaker. "Aaron Jacobs, divorce attorney. Since we lived in a false state and I had clear evidence of infidelity, Aaron told me I was in a strong position. The fact that I bought the house before the marriage meant it would not be considered community property, just like the majority of my investments and savings. She advised me to secure my finances immediately, so Vince drove me to the bank. I transferred most of our joint funds to a separate account, leaving enough money in the joint account to avoid any accusation of financial abandonment. I left exactly $5,000 in the joint account. Enough to show I was not trying to leave her destitute, but not enough to fund a new life with my brother. The rest, about $38,000, was placed in an individual account in my name. I also called my investment firm to verify that my assets acquired before marriage, about $115,000 spread across several funds, were well documented as separate property. When Chelsea came home that evening, everything was already in motion. Aaron was drafting the divorce papers. Vince had helped me regain some composure. I did not confront Chelsea that night. I was still in shock and needed to think strategically. "How was your shift?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Exhausting," she replied, detailing a fictional crisis in the ER. I watched her lie to my face while thinking about the emails where she described her date with Griffin that very day at my mother's house. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine while my entire life was collapsing. She asked why Vince's car had been in our driveway earlier. Apparently, the neighbors had mentioned it. I replied that we had discussed a work project. One more lie to add to the pile. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing was wrong while putting my plan in place. I went to work, made conversation with Chelsea in the evening, even watched our Thursday show together while dying inside. I gathered all my important documents and put them in a bank safety deposit box. I canceled our joint credit cards. I even installed small cameras in the common areas, totally legal since it was my house. Vince helped me install them while Chelsea was working. In case they try to take or destroy anything, he advised. Austin from hospital admin texted to check on me. Turns out he had seen Chelsea and Griffin together at a restaurant weeks ago, looking much more intimate than in-laws should be. He was looking for a way to tell me. I thanked him for trying and told him I had discovered the truth myself. My plan really took shape on Sunday night. Chelsea was in the shower when a notification popped up on her iPad sitting on the coffee table. A message from Griffin saying he couldn't wait to see her tomorrow at Mom's. The betrayal was literally happening every day under my nose. That is when I decided on the dinner plan. I called my father on Monday morning and asked if he could come to a family dinner at our place this weekend. I told him I had good news to share. "Are you sure you want to host?" "Your mother and I can do it," he offered. "No, I insist." "I want it to be at our house," I replied, thinking how perfect it would be to confront them all on my territory. I invited Griffin and my parents and told Chelsea to get ready for a special dinner. She seemed nervous but agreed. I saw the tension in her shoulders when I mentioned Griffin was coming. She spent the day texting, probably coordinating stories with him and Mom. In the days leading up to the dinner, I met Aaron 2 more times. She had the drafts of the divorce filing ready. Aaron called me Thursday with an update. The papers would be ready Friday morning. I picked them up during my lunch break, the manila envelope almost burning a hole in my backpack all afternoon. On the day of the dinner, I took the afternoon off to prepare everything. I ordered food from a nice Italian restaurant downtown. No way I was cooking. The divorce papers in a manila envelope and a file of emails in a larger envelope for my father. The dining room camera was recording in case things escalated and I needed evidence later. I had also planned another surprise. I had cashed out some stock options and had a cashier's check for $10,000 made out to my father. Exactly the amount I knew my parents had recently lent Griffin to pay off his credit cards. I wanted my father to get his money back before the family imploded. My parents arrived first at 6:30 p.m. Mom gave me a weird hug, too tight, and immediately asked where Chelsea was. "She is getting ready upstairs," I replied, my voice still surprisingly calm. Griffin arrived last at 6:45 p.m. He wore that arrogant smirk that made me want to punch him immediately. He hugged me like a brother, patting me on the back as if we were still close. I had to summon all my self-control not to react. Chelsea came down in that blue dress I had bought her for our anniversary. We all sat down at the table. I remained calm, talking about work, the weather, Dad's golf. Mom was shooting nervous glances between Chelsea and Griffin. Chelsea barely touched her food, pushing it around her plate. After the main course, Dad raised his glass. "So, what is this good news you wanted to tell us?" I smiled, slid my hand under the table, and pulled out the manila envelope. "Actually, I have something to share," I said, sliding it toward Chelsea. "These are divorce papers." The room went totally silent. Chelsea's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" She whispered without opening the envelope. "I know everything, Chelsea. You and Griffin, the baby that might be his, and Mom helping you hide it all." My voice remained calm, even though I was boiling inside. Mom let out a loud, dramatic gasp. "How dare you accuse them of such a thing? Chelsea would never do that." I cut her off by pulling out the second envelope and handing it to my father. "These are emails between Mom and Chelsea where they talk about the affair and how to hide it from me. It's been going on for at least 3 months." My father's hands shook as he started to read. The color left his face. Griffin stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You didn't have the right to snoop through those emails," he shouted, as if that was the real crime. "I think I had every right to know my wife was sleeping with my brother and might be pregnant with his child," I replied, still in a steady voice. "How long did you plan to hide this from me, Chelsea? You were just going to make me believe the baby was mine." Chelsea burst into tears. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "I love you. It was a mistake. A 3-month mistake with my brother while my mother covered for you." I laughed, but without a trace of humor. "And now you are pregnant." Mom tried to grab the papers Dad was reading, but he pushed her away. "Marianne, what is this?" he asked in a dangerously calm voice. "You helped them hide this from Derek." My mother's face went from fake shock to panic. "Chelsea, you told me you were sure it was Derek's child," she said suddenly, throwing Chelsea under the bus to save herself. Dad looked up from the emails, his face hard as stone. "Marianne, you knew? You helped them hide this from our son?" His voice was low but terribly serious. Mom started crying, trying to play the victim. "I just wanted to protect the family. Griffin made a mistake, but breaking the family apart wouldn't help anyone." Griffin, that smug jerk, even sneered. "Oh, come on. It's not that big a deal. Chelsea and I, we had a connection. It happens. Derek is always at work anyway. He barely pays attention to her." Something snapped inside me. I stood up, walked around the table, and punched him right in the nose. There was a satisfying crack and blood started pouring immediately down his face. He stumbled back, knocking over a small table. "You idiot," Mom screamed, rushing toward Griffin. "Derek, what is wrong with you?" Dad then stood up, angrier than I had ever seen him. "That is enough, Marianne. Our son just learned his wife and brother betrayed him in the worst way possible, and you are worried about Griffin?" He pointed a finger. "Get out of this house now." Griffin was holding his bloody nose, glaring at us. "This isn't over. You're going to regret this." He spat before slamming the front door. Mom tried to follow him, but Dad grabbed her arm. "You stay here. We have a lot to discuss regarding your role in all this." Chelsea was still crying at the table. "Derek, please, we can fix this. I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." I turned to her, feeling nothing but icy contempt. "I want a paternity test. If you keep this baby, I need to know if it is mine. And whatever happens, we are done." I handed the cashier's check to my father. "This is to repay what Griffin recently borrowed from you. I figured you should get your money back before everything falls apart." Dad looked at the check, then at me, eyes full of sadness. "Son, I had no idea any of this was happening." Mom was frantically trying to justify herself, saying she only wanted to protect Griffin, that she knew it was wrong but thought it would just be a phase, that she didn't want to hurt me. Dad would hear none of it. He told her to get her coat. He was leaving. After my parents left, Chelsea and I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, she spoke. What happens now? Now, you pack your bag and you leave. The house is mine. It is not community property. You have until tomorrow to find somewhere to go, but it won't be here. She slowly nodded, then went upstairs to pack. I remained sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by the debris of what I thought was my life, feeling strangely calm. The worst had happened, and I had survived it. From here on, it would only be rebuilding. The next few weeks were a blur of appointments with lawyers and paperwork. Chelsea went to live with a friend, not with Griffin. Curiously, I changed the locks the day after the dinner. The paternity test was scheduled as soon as it was safe to do one. Chelsea agreed without arguing. I think a part of her hoped the baby was mine, believing it might change things. Then 2 weeks after the dinner, I was officially sued for simple assault thanks to Griffin, who had the nerve to report the punch to the police. My lawyer Aaron was not particularly worried. First offense, no weapon, and a situation of emotional provocation. Not a legal defense per se, but potentially relevant for sentencing. 3 months later, we had the hearing. Griffin arrived with his arm around Mom, playing the victim to perfection. I came with Aaron and 2 character witnesses from work, including Vince, who spoke of my professionalism and usual restraint. The judge reviewed the incident, heard testimony on the context, and accepted certain elements regarding the affair, not as justification, but as background. In the end, I was found guilty of simple assault and sentenced to a $500 fine, the judge stating it was an isolated act in response to a deeply personal betrayal. He did not mince words, saying I let my emotions override my judgment, while implying Griffin was lucky the situation didn't escalate further. Mom looked mortified. Griffin was shooting me looks like he expected applause. I considered those $500 well spent. Dad called me the day the charges were filed. He was furious, not at me, but at Griffin. He told me he had already taken steps to remove Griffin entirely from his will. When Mom found out, she apparently threw a monumental fit, threatening to leave Dad if he went through with it. I told her she was free to leave, but she should know I would make sure she got nothing if she chose Griffin over our family, Dad told me. That calmed her down very quickly. My father's finances are no joke. 30 years running his engineering firm, smart investments, real estate. No wonder Mom panicked when Dad threatened to disinherit Griffin. Mom's true face appeared throughout this story. She had raised Griffin thinking he could do no wrong, and she was now paying the consequences. Dad told me she was still in the house crying about how her family was falling apart, but at least she had stopped defending Griffin openly. Dad came by the house a week after the dinner. He brought his tools and helped me repaint the living room and master bedroom, erasing all traces of Chelsea's decorative choices. We didn't talk much while we worked, but when we finished, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You are handling this better than I would have at your age. I am proud of you." That meant more than he will ever know. I went back to work after a week off. Vince had told the team I was going through family issues and needed space. When I returned, he had moved my desk to another floor, away from Griffin's department. Smart move. I learned later that Vince had also placed Griffin on a performance improvement plan citing ethical concerns in his file. Technically, sleeping with your brother's wife is not grounds for firing, but Vince found ways to make Griffin's professional life difficult without crossing HR lines. Chelsea's very religious parents learned the whole story from my father, who felt they had a right to know what their daughter had done. They were devastated. Her father called me personally to apologize, saying he had raised her with better values than that. They told Chelsea she was no longer welcome in their home until she returned to God. It was pretty harsh, but I couldn't blame them for being disappointed. Griffin and Chelsea ended up renting an apartment together, although from what I heard, they were far from happy. Mom was their only visitor, coming in secret when she thought Dad wouldn't notice. I cut ties completely with all 3 of them. I changed my number, blocked their emails, everything. Dad is the only family member I still talk to. The paternity test results came back. The baby was not mine. In a way, it was a relief, a clean break with no biological tie to maintain. The divorce proceedings went smoothly after that, infidelity being proven and the paternity test confirming it was not my child. Since we lived in a false state, Chelsea got almost nothing. I kept the house, but traded the majority of our goods. She didn't even contest it. I think she knew she had no ground to stand on. Most of our friends took my side, especially after learning the whole story. A few tried to stay neutral, saying there are always two sides, but they quickly drifted away. My real friends, however, were there, dinner invitations, regular texts, refusing to let me isolate myself. I threw myself into work, taking on a new project redesigning the claims management system for a major insurance company. The 70-hour weeks kept me from thinking too much. Vince started grooming me for a technical director position, a faster progression than expected, but I was ready. I also joined a gym. I hired a trainer who made me suffer 3 times a week, lost the 33 pounds I had gained during the marriage, built muscle, started running again, and ran a half marathon 6 months after the divorce. Dating was the last thing on my mind. Friends tried to introduce me to people, but I wasn't ready. Trust issues don't disappear overnight. 6 months after everything fell apart, I was in a good place. The divorce was finalized. The assault case was settled with a small fine, and I had been promoted at work. The house was finally starting to feel like mine again after the renovations and getting rid of everything that reminded me of Chelsea. I completely redid the master bathroom. New tile, new fixtures, everything brand new. I turned the guest room into a home gym. I built a custom TV stand in the living room. The house became a project that occupied my hands and focused my mind. In the end, it looked nothing like the place where Chelsea and I had lived together. My finances were looking better than ever. The promotion came with a $20,000 salary increase plus stock options. I maxed out my 401k contributions, opened a separate investment account, and started looking at rental properties as a potential income source. At 28, I was in a much better financial situation than most men my age, especially without a wife draining my resources. Then, out of nowhere, I received a message from Mom asking me to meet her at a downtown diner. She said it was important and she needed to speak to me in person. I agreed to see her during my lunch break, specifying I only had 30 minutes. When I arrived at the diner, I immediately regretted coming. Mom was not alone. Chelsea was sitting next to her, looking exhausted with a baby carrier sitting on the booth seat. I almost turned around, but Mom spotted me and waved frantically. I walked over and sat across from her without even saying hello. "What is this?" I asked, looking directly at Mom. She at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she admitted, "but I needed to talk to you. Griffin has been arrested." That got my full attention. Arrested why? He was caught embezzling money from the company, and he was also arrested for drunk driving last week, Mom said, her voice shaking. He is facing a heavy prison sentence. I need your help to pay his bail. I looked at her, in disbelief. You want me to pay bail for the brother who slept with my wife, got her pregnant, and then filed assault charges against me? You are crazy. Looking closer at her, I noticed her designer purse was worn and scuffed. Her manicure chipped. Dad must have cut off her funds. Good. Chelsea then spoke up in a small voice. She left us right after Sadie was born, she said, pointing to the baby. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He was drinking a lot. Sometimes he got angry, shoved me. I felt nothing, neither satisfaction seeing their relationship crumble nor pity for her situation. Nothing. He hit her, Derek, Mom added as if that was supposed to trigger a reaction from me. And now she is alone with the baby, no job, no support. I looked at Chelsea. And what do you expect from me? She started crying. I don't know what to do. My parents won't talk to me. I can't work with a newborn. Griffin emptied our bank account before getting arrested. I thought maybe you could help me just until I get back on my feet. I leaned back against the booth and looked at these two women who had betrayed me and were now asking for help because the man they chose over me turned out to be exactly the sleazeball I always knew he was. Mom nodded. Family is family, Derek. I almost laughed. Where was that family loyalty? When you were helping them hide their affair from me? When you convinced Chelsea to try to make me believe this child was mine? I made a mistake, Mom said, tears in her eyes. I thought I was protecting everyone. No, you were protecting your favorite, I replied coldly. And now you are choosing him again, even after everything he did. Mom leaned toward me, lowering her voice. Your father is being unreasonable. He froze all our accounts. I have no access to money without his approval. He talks about divorcing if I don't cut ties completely with Griffin. That sounds reasonable to me. Sounds like Dad is finally standing up for himself. I stood up and pulled out my wallet. I placed a card on the table, one for a women's shelter. This place can help you, Chelsea. Me, I won't. As for Griffin, he can rot in prison for all I care. I turned to Mom. Don't ever contact me again. Tell Dad I miss him and he can call me whenever he wants. I left without looking back. In the car, I sat for a moment, expecting to feel something. Anger, a sense of revenge, maybe even pity. But no, they were no longer my problem. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes they left behind, and I was doing just fine without them. That evening, Dad called me. He had figured out where Mom had gone and why. He apologized for her behavior and assured me he had no intention of helping Griffin. We talked for almost an hour about work, the house, the new woman I was seeing, normal conversations between father and son. Months later, I learned through friends that Griffin had accepted a plea deal, 18 months in prison for embezzlement. Chelsea had returned to her hometown and apparently reconciled with her parents to the point where they were helping her with the baby. As for me, my promotion at work turned into a director position leading a team of 15 developers. I bought a rental property that is already generating positive cash flow. I am planning a week-long trek in Yellowstone next summer. Something I always wanted to do, but never took the time for. Life isn't perfect, but I'm moving forward and I know now that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. Some days, that is enough. Comment. Sometimes the hardest part of betrayal is not the act itself, but finding the strength to walk away without looking back. We often think strength means fighting back, but real power comes from knowing your worth and refusing to engage with toxicity. Setting boundaries is not about punishing others. It is simply about protecting your peace and mental well-being. Healing does not happen overnight. It takes daily discipline to choose yourself over the drama that tries to pull you back in. When life knocks you down, the best revenge is rebuilding a life that is happy, healthy, and successful on your own terms. Like the father in this story, standing by your principles even when it hurts is the truest definition of integrity. You have the right to close the door on people who hurt you, even if they are family, because your peace is non-negotiable. Being kind does not mean you have to be a doormat, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to say goodbye. I hope this reminds you that no matter how messy things get, you always have the power to write a better next chapter. Take care of yourself. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.